How many four-letter words can I use on that?
Trying to switch to a double. Cheddar is driving. Nothing yet. Takedown, Michael Cheddar.
Oh, Nick, I'm a top guy, so I love top wrestling.
Hale trying to stick him. He does. Maximus Hale the fall.
So I think that wrestling is the greatest sport on earth.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of On3 Wrestling. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. With me today is Navy Wrestling head coach Cary Kolat. Coach, appreciate your time today. I'm glad to talk to you. You know, got to give a lot of love to the Navy midshipmen. Just we were talking before we got on the air. You just got done practice. I got to imagine the preseason prep for you guys has been going quite smoothly as we're now just a couple weeks away from the start of the season.
Yeah. I mean, everything's been running. We're in the lifting game. We just kind of started the conditioning phase, and the guys have been in there on the mat. Today was a scrap day on the mat. Looked pretty good. Did 2 matches. Slowly bringing their weight down, getting them adjusted. We don't want them hitting flat weight just yet. I don't think any wrestler wants to make flat weight until it's time. But bringing them down, shrinking them down, seeing how they perform as they get close to weight, and so that's what we did this morning. And yeah, they're looking pretty good, trying to stay injury free as much as possible, as any program's trying to do, and then getting ready for the kickoff next week.
How do you necessarily ramp up that conditioning? Obviously, you can wrestle till the cows come home, but when you ramp up the conditioning phase, is it part of on the mat also maybe running outside, different exercises? How do you really ramp it up to get them into that peak wrestling shape before the start of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll do both, right? We do both today. This afternoon, they'll come in. It will be a solid session of conditioning. They're going to hit the bike today, followed by a lift. So it's kind of a hitting their cardio, hitting their lungs and heart a little bit, and then taking them off and putting them into a muscle fatigue zone and making them continue to push through it and maintain position through that. But look, in the end, man, you get your best conditioning when you're actively wrestling in the room. That's what you tell them. So they're always being conditioned. It's just whether a guy is going to continue to put points on in the practice room in a third period, or is he going to coast? And so if we catch a guy coasting, we're going to be on him. And I think every coach across the United States is doing the same thing. That's what we're looking for. That's really where your conditioning base is going to come from, actually competing in it.
So there's more buzz for you guys coming into the 24-25 campaign. David Key, your All-American from last year, kind of set the precedent. So I just wanted to rewind a little bit and just get your reaction to him becoming an All-American last year, and maybe just setting up the stage for this new group this year to maybe have more than one All-American, to have more guys in contention for those podium spots. What did David Key mean to your program last year to get onto that podium?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you see that, it's great for kids around the country see it recruiting wise. I feel like every year we've just gotten better and better. Finished ranked higher than when I got here, so we've been inching forward. And it's time to start taking leaps. Going into last year's NCAA tournament, I felt like we had we had 2 to 3 guys that had potential to be on that stand. We had some rough situations, during the NCAA tournament. I wouldn't say bad calls, because bad calls happen. You just don't put yourself in those positions. But we had some guys close to getting more points for us and close to getting on the stand. David Key, people always ask me if I'm shocked about David Key. No, David Key was he was that guy. He had an awkward style to wrestle. If you underestimated him, you would find out he's got a position where you thought you had him, that he's actually really powerful. Positions I wouldn't go to, but for David, they worked. So it wasn't shocking for David Key to be on the stand. He had the potential to be on the stand as a freshman, his freshman year at the NCAA tournament, and just made a bad decision, didn't know the score quite right in a bout. So he was always close, but he always had, during the season, David had ups and downs. We were always trying to get him even kill, but the guy always found a way to turn it on at the end of the season. And he turned it on at the end of the season again at the NCAA tournament and walked out an All-American. So I was happy for David, happy for his parents, all of it. He put the work in, did the work, and got himself there.
As far as the guys this year, Josh Koderhandt here, your 141-pounder, he's ranked number 9 in the preseason according to Intermat. He was named team captain earlier this preseason. It seems to me he's another guy that's going to be in contention for the podium, maybe along with some other guys in your roster. But I wanted to focus on him first, because what does it take to become a team captain at Navy? Maybe it's similar to other service academies. Maybe it's similar to how other wrestling teams operate. What did you see out of Josh that enabled him to be named team captain and go into this year, with a lot of expectations?
Yeah, the team captain is a pretty big deal here, right? I've been, it's the military, it's rank is always playing a part.
Mhm.
At other institutions, and you probably yourself, Nick, when you're on a high school team, maybe your team picked it, or maybe your head coach did, right?
Mhm.
College was the same way. You didn't really give too much weight to it. Here at the Naval Academy, you're judged for the first 3 years of your career by your peers on the wrestling team. Um, they get a vote, but not everybody gets a vote. You have to do certain things to be allowed to cast a vote for team captain. As the coaching staff, we only get one vote. So you're picked really amongst your peers. You're picked on your wrestling, obviously, or your leader out on the mat. I mean, if some guy's going out there and shutting down and quitting, well, that's not going to motivate the team. So they look at you on that aspect. They look at your character. The institution itself looks at your grades and where you stack out in your grades. They look at, have you been in trouble, or do you, your record's pretty clean and nothing big. So they take all that into an account. And then it's voted, and only a firstie or a senior, as we say here, we call them a firstie. That's the only thing that allows you to be placed into that. So we've got firsties who can't even be considered for captain sometimes. So Josh was selected by his teammates. It was an obvious pick for us, we thought. And then the Naval Academy approved it. And then with that comes responsibility. It's not just you're the team captain. I mean, this guy is looked at as an extension of the coaching staff. He'll be vocal in the room. At the Naval Academy, you'll handle, sometimes they've got a brief going on or things like that. He's the liaison to the administration, saying we've got a training time at that time, or what the guys need to do. So it comes with responsibility, but that's the Naval Academy from day one. It's about making you a professional person. So you don't just come in and go to school. You come in, you go to school, you're training, you're competing, and then you might have little jobs amongst your company, amongst your team. And you learn how to do those things and work within an organization, which is different from other colleges.
As far as on the mat, he's ranked number 9 at 141 pounds. Danny Wask comes in, your other preseason ranked guy, at number 22 at 174 pounds. With those two guys and maybe some other guys that maybe people are overlooking on your roster this year, on the mat, how do you feel this team stacks up compared to last year, especially with two guys that are already getting more preseason recognition, and maybe you make that next step and go from 1 to maybe 2 All-Americans by the time you roll around in March?
Yeah, I think we have a really good balance of from plebes all the way up to firstie. So we're not top heavy on firsties, where we're going to have a team and we're resetting. And what that allows us to do, every guy we recruit and put into that mix, he's coming in with a solid group of upperclassmen who can put pressure on him. And if he can get himself in the lineup as a plebe, he's going to be a pretty solid competitor out of the gate. So we're not going to have a big dip with Danny and Josh in there. Josh being a firstie, we're going to lose him the following year. But he's going to be able to really take a leadership role in the practice room when it comes to, how we want to compete and what we want to see. Danny being a sophomore is really solid for us. I mean, we're going to have another 2 years with him after that. And then I feel like we've got some really good newcomers who are plebes are going to step in. So I think our depth in terms of the class rank and where we sit, it really helps us for the next coming years of, every year consistently putting people on the stand at the NCAA tournament and eventually, getting a national championship.
I'm always fascinated by how a freshman class adapts to a place like Navy or Army or obviously or Air Force. It's a little bit different at Service Academy. You can almost compare it to the Ivy League, where maybe you get like an Ivy League type education, but now you're also putting the military backing behind it as well. How has this freshman class adjusted to their first year on campus, practice room, the classroom, just everything that is involved with the Naval Academy? What have you seen out of this new class?
I think they're doing really good. I mean, I would correct you and say that our education is higher than the Ivy Leagues when you look at the stats of how our alumni go and how they do in life afterwards. The Naval Academy sets you up with with just being an officer, with just having the ability to put on your resume that you graduated from the Naval Academy, and you instantly are in charge of people. I know every college kid in America thinks I got a degree, now people should be working under me, but you have to understand how to manage people. So they learn for 4 years how to lead, how to manage. As soon as they graduate, they might have 30 or 40 people that they're in charge of. And they do that for at least 5 years or more if they want it. And so they do really well in life after that, because people looking to hire these guys because they can kick in doors and get things done, and they know how to do it and get people motivated. The class is adjusted really good. I mean, they knew what to expect. You go through plebe summer, which is 6 weeks. That ends, and then at that point, you're with the wrestling team. You're going to college. You're training. They've got their study hall hours just like everybody else. We've got our 3 training slots a day that we can use. I mean, we're not training all 3, but we're using 2 of those slots a day to train. So they're getting ready. You've got some classes that are different, right? Like here, you will take calculus. At any other institution, you have the choice to take calculus. So our gen eds will be different. Once you get through your gen eds, you're going to start into your major. You pick that major at the end of your first year, and then you start moving into your track. So we've got a mix of guys. We've got the engineers, we've got the history majors, the language majors, we've got the business majors. So we have a mix of guys across the spectrum. But people shouldn't. Sometimes there's a misconception that it's so impossibly hard to get through here. That's not true. If you're a worker, and wrestlers are workers, like they get through. And we've done well with all our guys that we've recruited, and they get through the place.
You love to hear it. I wanted to switch gears to your staff this year. A couple new guys on staff under you, namely Barry Davis, former Wisconsin head coach. Everyone knows what he did in his wrestling career, silver medalist at the Olympics back in 1984. What was that process like to bring him onto staff? Because, again, everyone at this point as a coach probably remembers him running the Badgers for, over 2 decades at that point. Yeah. What was that like? What were your conversations like with Barry, bringing him onto the staff? I mean, was he always interested in maybe making this type of move to become an assistant head coach later in life? I mean, what was it like bringing Davis onto staff?
Yeah. Well, I tried to get Barry here from day one when I took the job. I kept calling him. So I probably called him every year for 3 years, and then I gave up calling him. And then he finally reached out to me and said, I'm ready to go. So I've known Barry, quite a long time. Since my days, like we overlapped in a weight class when I was young, when he was phasing out and I was getting ready to enter into college. Then saw him as a coach for years. Obviously, you know what the man has done. 2-time Olympian, 3-time national champ, wrestled under Gable. So Barry's got a great way of knowing what to say to somebody at any given time. I think he loves his role as an assistant coach, as the head coach. You take all the heat, win or lose, right? You take all the heat in different areas. So he's in a great role where he fully can just focus on the guys, mentally, the guys technically. He does a great job of recruiting with us. So I was excited when he called me and said, "Hey, I'm ready to make the move," and it's been a positive all around. The guys love him.
And the other one was Ty Eustice from Davidson. What is his impact? Like, obviously, he's a little bit earlier in his coaching career, but what was it like bringing him onto the staff?
Yeah, Ty is kind of exactly the same thing. The guy was a national finalist. He wrestled at Iowa. He understands big time wrestling. He does a really good job. He understands the service academy really quick. Sometimes there's a lot to learn. I know when I got here, it took over COVID. There was a lot of things to learn a little bit. It doesn't always operate like a regular institution. Like if you want to get a bus and go somewhere, well, there's paperwork that gets filed for that because you're taking these guys off a federal complex. So Ty has adapted really well. He's fit in nicely with recruiting. And again, it's just another guy on the staff that the guys, you got different guys have pockets, right? Some are going to go to Ty, some will go to Barry, some will go to me. They all find that guy that they might just sit in the office and crack jokes with, or something serious they need to talk about, or in the coaching room. You can go to any coach, but they kind of find a guy that they kind of gravitate towards. So everybody's kind of starting to find who their guy is.
It is interesting because they're both Iowa guys that they've seen big time wrestling throughout their entire careers, whether they're wrestling or coaching at this point. How do they make that adjustment to a service academy? Because like you just alluded to, it is vastly different. Yes, like there's still the elements of college wrestling. It's still wrestling in the room, but the whole atmosphere is different. These guys are starting their military careers, and there's a lot that goes into it more so maybe than a traditional academic institution. What is that like for those coaches?
Well, it's not you. So you use the word vastly, right? This is what we always tell people. Everybody thinks there's this drastic difference. And the best way to explain it is this. It's a 30% difference, right? When you went to Rutgers and if it was Friday night and you wanted to go home and see mom and dad, you could do that. Maybe you catch a little hell from your coach because you didn't inform him or whatever it might be. The difference here is you plan, you get organized, you're professional about it, right? If I want to go home for mom's birthday, I put in the paperwork, a couple weeks, I go to my CEO in my company. Can I get permission? Then you go to your coach. Hey, are we practicing? Can I have permission? It just moves a little bit slower in that aspect. But in terms of the training and the academics and what we're doing here, nothing's different in that aspect. The 30% is, if I want to take a weekend, got to put in the paperwork. Do I have days to take it in a weekend? Because you're being paid, right? The taxpayer is paying you. So I can't just, with my boss paying me, I just can't leave for a week. I have to put in the paperwork for vacation. That's the difference here. That's how it operates. And then the other difference is you don't pick your classes out of the gate. You're going to take the general gen eds, and then you pick what you want after that, the classes I want to be in. So there's not this drastic difference that everybody thinks, but you can't go AWOL. That's the drastic difference.
No, we wouldn't want these guys going AWOL at all. So we'll switch attention back over to On the Mat. The schedule's coming up, obviously. A couple top dates on your schedule. You guys open up at Pitt on November 2nd, so not too much further away from the start of the actual regular season. Just what do you make of that match, and maybe some of the other top dates on your schedule that you're really looking forward to this year?
Yeah, well, I think we hit Pitt, a competitive program. It's in the heart of wrestling country in Pennsylvania. They're in the WPIAL, so they pull some really good local talent, and then they're a school that can pull somebody from across the country. Pitt's always going to be solid. We opened with them last year. I'm sure that they want to even the score from last year, and that's why you put your team in the fire. Then we'll hit UNC, the Drexel, the following week, and then we'll follow up with Iowa State, and Iowa State puts on a big show for every single duel to run out through the fire and all that great stuff. So you want to put your guys in all the environments they need to be in. Maybe Iowa State's going to be a bigger environment than other places, but in the end, the environment is what you make of it. So you either got 10,000 people cheering for you in your mind, or you get 10,000 people cheering against you. And it's teaching those guys how to block those things out and how to compete in any situation at any time. Wrestling in a quiet gym is a difficult place to wrestle, right? Like, you have to be able to get yourself motivated to compete and then motivated to wrestle all 3 periods as it goes along. We're constantly on those guys about scoring points. Last year, we dropped 5 bouts by a takedown. And when I say a takedown, it would have been just one of our guys getting one more takedown gives us a major. We win by 1 point. One guy getting a takedown, or a turn in there. So we don't want to repeat that mistake. You have got to be continually scoring, and so those environments will help put them in that. Can you handle it when 5 or 10,000 people are screaming against you?
Yeah, you guys went 8-6 overall last year as a dual meet team. Now, it's interesting you bring up that one takedown moniker, and that you want to essentially, we have to keep scoring. That was a big emphasis, it seems like, for your guys' offseason and preseason. When you emphasize something like that, even if it's just something that's a minute detail like that, what goes into that type of work to get that extra takedown? Is it refining technique? Is it the extra conditioning push? What is it exactly?
Yeah, well, we talked about, like, today, we actually had the conditioning push. You're actually wrestling better in the third than you are in the first. People start out, the old saying, you might be a little bit cold if you didn't have the warm-up going. You think about breathing as you go along, and then you get into that second period, and people like to refer to it as the second wind, but really your body's adjusting to the pressure you're putting it under it. You should be able to put more points up on the third than you do in the first 2. So we talk about that, and then we talk about focus. Like, get your mind out of the winning category. Your job is to be the best possible wrestler that you can be. I mean, that is what drove me. That's what drove everybody on my staff. That's what drove Barry Davis. It wasn't about winning. It was like, can I dominate this guy in all 3 positions? And I want to send a message clearly to everybody in my weight class, like, that I'm the guy. And when you have that kind of guy in the room and that mindset and that approach, that I'm just going to keep putting points on the board, then everything gets right. And the more guys you have like that, the more it rubs off on the guy above you or below you. And the same as when you have a negative situation. If I got a guy out there, I tell people sometimes I've watched them win and I felt like we lost the match. You scored early, you sat on a lead, and it was the most boring, non-entertaining bout that I have seen. And you can see it. It just brings your bench down. And we've had matches where I've seen a guy lose, but he was outmatched and he was 1 point in because he showed up and he kept going, and it's fired us up. And you see it and you sense it. And just the fan base. I mean, people want to come and be entertained. And look, you can watch the NCAA finals sometimes, and we'll leave there saying that was a boring match, right? People, NCAA finals, they want to see 2 guys excited to go out there and try to compete for it and wrestle for it. Yeah, so we want the same thing. You want it all year long, and not one match is more important than the other, but all of them are training each time. It's a training opportunity to put a singlet on and wrestle in front of a crowd. I think, we wrestled our blue gold last week, and we saw adjustments. We saw some really great wrestling in the room, great scrambles, 2 guys getting after it, and then Friday we put singlets on, we bring in a crowd, and you saw an adjustment happen, which is as a teaching point, a coaching moment of why did you adjust? You truly want to train the way you want to compete. So now all of a sudden the singlets on in a crowd, so you don't make an adjustment. Just open up and wrestle.
One match where for at least for you guys that the crowd is certainly going to be into it is the Army-Navy duel. And I talked to Army head coach Kevin Ward about this previously. It's one of the more unique duels in all of college wrestling. Everyone knows about the Army-Navy football game, which I actually will ask you about in a second. But that duel this year, and you mentioned the one takedown moniker. You guys lost by 1 point last year. You go up to West Point this season. That date is February 16th. What is that duel for you guys? I got to imagine it's very similar to the Army-Navy football game and any Army-Navy contest in any sport in the academy. What does that duel mean to this program? I know you don't want to put one duel above the others, but I feel like that one, if there's a candidate, it has to be that one. Yeah, right. I mean, we want to beat everybody is what we say. Like that's what it is. But yeah, every school has a rivalry. They're good for your program. They're competition. And you want to be bringing out your best wrestling for that. But I mean, more or less, that duel is extremely important for the institutions and the alumni base who have come from each institution. Like they want to be able to brag all year long, right? Like that's where they want to be. So, but it's great, and the timing of it's good because it's right before conference, and you start to see guys start to bring out their wrestling as a season. Like that's what you want to see every time we step on the mat. That being this year, our second to last duel, we should start to see some of our best wrestling start to come out as we start heading in the conference. But yeah, you can't say it enough. Like you have to really be in it to understand the fire of that duel between both schools and what it means. And everybody gets up for it. I've seen stats. I've gone back when I got here, I studied it, and I have seen clearly situations where one team was better than the other, and it comes down to 2 to 3 points each time. There haven't been really many blowouts, even though we have a commanding lead on the rivalry. They're always tight matches, tight individual bouts, and it's usually a tight duel. I'm a big dual meet guy, and I love trying to grow the sport that way, maybe getting more unique things to, put these duels on a national stage, whether it's the arena, whether they do it in a unique location. Have you guys ever thought about either changing the location just from aside from the institutions, kind of like how the Army-Navy game goes to a neutral site? Have you thought about, what else you could do for this duel to kind of put it at the forefront of the sport? I mean, it is America's duel after all. So I don't know, what are those conversations like to make that thing really important? Yeah, we've agreed on a neutral site this year. We were going to try, but the dates didn't line up with what we wanted to be. We still like the duel to be it should be the finale. We don't, we don't really want to wrestle the Army-Navy duel in the mid-season. We just don't see it that way, but we have agreed to a neutral site. It's just getting our timing to line up and find a place that makes sense for fans and alumni of both institutions. But I think you put that duel anywhere and you can pack the house. But once we get our dates lined up, it would be pretty solid. Love to see that. Just to switch gears real quick, because I know it's a little bit different because the transfer portal very different for service academies compared to regular institutions, and we've seen how NIL and the transfer portal has evolved over the last few years throughout all college athletics, all sports, all institutions, and it's changed wrestling pretty drastically, I would say, or at least over the last year or two. What do you preach to your team when it comes to the portal, NIL, however that may come across, compared to other schools? What do you say to your team and your staff in those areas? There's no comparisons, right? There's short-term thinkers and there's long-term thinkers, right? I wanted to be the best in the world. I wanted to be the Olympic champion when I was competing. That was the long-term goal, right? And so I always kept that as that guiding light out there. And then you have all these little things you got to do in between to get there. You can't just be focused out there. You got to be in the present situation. So we did a comparison. I ran a model and looked at it. I said, what if a kid got a full scholarship in $50,000 a year to go to school, and then got a job starting at let's say $65,000, and he got $5,000 raise for the next 5 years, the same exact time when my guys are starting they've commissioned and they start their military career. And my guys lost out by $5,000 is what it came down to. But my guys got the health benefits, the VA loan, a resume,
a career started, a 401k, all that stuff is going, working toward a pension. And the job opportunity of coming from Navy is through the roof. We're number 3 in the country in the highest earned average income. I mean, that's all schools. That's Ivy Leagues, everyone. So our guys are set up for success. So the NIL is a short-sighted thing. The other thing about the NIL is a great deal. If kids look at it that way, and then all of a sudden that thing can go away right away. At any time you're not performing. We're in professional sports now. It's what I tell. We recruit now, like, they want to talk to us about a scholarship, on our visit. I'm like, you can call and make that call anymore because it's a business on both sides, and coaches are going to have to get used to it. How do I coach now in more of this professional format like they do in pro football or baseball and that? It's not personal. And the kids and the parents are going to have to get used to it. I hear them crying, but I'm like, you wanted this money. You're getting this money now. If you're not performing, the next guy's coming in. The other aspect is if you're being recruited to an institution and they're giving NIL deals and you haven't been offered an NIL deal, well, then you're not the guy.
Yeah.
Like you're not the guy. And they can come in over top you at any second. So the great thing that we have is my guys, the first 5 years of their career, they're going to earn over $430K minimum, I think, over the first 5 years of earning power. And that is on autopilot. It is set for them. And if, while they're here, they're going to school in the wrestling, and then they're set on autopilot, and they're set. And the transfer portal, look, we're getting ready to go to 30-man rosters. I already know coaches are talking about it. So I'll tell any kid that's young out there, if you think that the Naval Academy is a possibility for you, we can't communicate with you. You need to start filling out the Naval Academy application right now if you think you're jumping in the portal at the end of the year. So it's a possibility for us. But you got to start that application and get it going. And when it opens up, we're going to be looking the same as everybody else.
It's an interesting way to look at it. Just real quick, I wanted your take and just kind of rewind a little bit. You guys had an All-American last year, and obviously Army and Air Force did. Wyatt Hendrickson from Air Force now at Oklahoma State, but all 3 service academies were represented last year. And without throwing, everyone's talking about the portal, NIL, who can almost buy the best roster, build the best roster with a bunch of veterans. You guys still did it almost the old school way and said, this is all through hard work. And it was kind of a breakthrough year for those service academies. What did it mean to see all 3 represented on that stage last year, with All Americans? Yeah,
it's good when you're in the heat of it. You kind of got some heat, and you don't really like each other when you're doing the work against each other. But then at the end, no, it's good. It was good for everybody to see that you can come here and wrestle, because there's a million misconceptions about the Naval Academy. Like, somebody's going to be screaming in your face from day one. That's not true. You're going to be marching every day. That's not true. It's college and it's wrestling. There are some things, and I go back, I said, it's the 70-30 rule. 30% of what you're missing out at that, you're missing the frat party. Okay. That's not a bad thing. You got to be back at midnight if you're not on an overnight thing. That's not a bad thing. You've got, upperclassmen mentors on you for your academics. You can't hide here. That's a good thing. So if you're serious about your wrestling and serious about your future, this is a place you want to be. And then in the end, 70% of my roster, I always tell people when I got here, never thought about a service academy or thought about service. And then they got a phone call. They started researching it and said, you know what, this is for me. And I'll tell you, everybody's run off to college for years. So if you want to separate yourself in the job market, there's only a few federal institutions, right? And that's a difference maker now. Like, where you have a kid who's gone through some discipline. He understands structure. He understands big organizations and how to work and how to manage people. That is going to be what makes you employable, because the world is crazy right now. You see some of these campuses, protesters shutting them down. Professors can do or say whatever they want. That doesn't happen here, and as CEOs of companies, that's what they're looking for, these kind of kids.
I love that pitch. I wanted to ask you about the sport in general and just growing the sport. Again, I alluded to it before. I'm a big dual meet guy. It seems like you are too. I still believe that there should be a team national championship, a team tournament in terms of a dual meet format that determines your national champion. You leave the individual tournament alone, but you add in that team tournament for as far as dual meets are concerned. Are you of that same mindset as well, considering what you've done with the Army-Navy duel, how you're looking forward to scheduling these big teams or these really these highly ranked teams on your schedule? What do you make of that idea?
Yeah, years ago, if you'd have talked to me, you go through changes and you look at things differently a little bit. I wasn't crazy about the change years ago, but now I am. I think we do. I think we do need to move down a path of dual meets. Having more weight and carry more weight. I know the fans like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to shift there. I don't know how you do it without touching the NCAA tournament. They've talked about that team race is good too, right? But it's because we grew up under that same system. So,
right.
There's the worry. We've got to protect wrestling. We got to keep it safe. We got to keep trying to growing it. We're losing some teams, every year. So the concern is if you take the way the format is now, that you don't see the smaller schools get somebody in there and they're not talked about. And if we go to dual meet, then it just becomes this, the haves have it, and the have-nots are in the same place and we're kind of stuck there. So that would be a concern. So we've got to be careful about how we do it, but dual meets have to matter more.
Without a doubt. Cary Kolat with me here on On3 Wrestling. Coach, I appreciate your time. I'll leave you here with this one because there is a lot of buzz with Army and Navy right now. Both football teams undefeated. That game in December looks really good, and they're both vying for potentially a conference title and maybe even a college football playoff spot. What is a football team like that? Again, Army Navy, everyone loves that football game. Everyone loves watching the service academies play football. But the fact that both are undefeated right now, what has the Navy football team done to the campus in terms of the buzz right now?
Oh, it's a buzz, right? All over. Our guys are talking about it. I mean, everybody, it's a big deal. Football's football, right? We both need our teams to do well. It helps all the Olympic sports. But yeah, it is. I know my AD is excited. I know that coaching staff is excited. The potential for 2 matchups against Army this year. On top of that, just outside of the Army game itself. So it's good. It's been really good for both schools, and it's been some excitement on the yard.
Cary Kolat with me here on On3 Wrestling. Coach, good luck this season. Looking forward to watching you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys out in Philadelphia for the NCAA championships out in March.
All right. Thanks, Nick.